del Afganistán, excelentísimo señor Abdul Rahim Ghafoorzai, a quien doy la palabra.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Mr. President, I begin by congratulating you for assuming the presidency of the Council for the month of April. We all know your outstanding contribution to the work of the United Nations, especially the time you have been presiding over many important UN gatherings during which your wisdom and patience has been recognized. I should also like to pay a special tribute to your predecessor, Madam Madeleine Albright of the United States, who once again proved her diplomatic skill and ability during her term of presidency of this Council over delicate issues pertaining to global peace and stability. Mr. President, allow me to extend to you and each distinguished members of the Council my delegation's appreciation for the convening of this orientation debate on Afghanistan, as well as for the opportunity provided to the delegation of the Islamic State of Afghanistan to address the Council. The nations determined to live independent and free from alignments as positive elements to world peace and tranquility have placed trust and hope upon the United Nations organization. This trust is particularly appealing to the charter obligation of the Security Council, which is bearing the crucial task of the maintenance of global and regional peace and stability. Yet, quite naturally, it is the Security Council as a primary reference for the sovereign nations to look to whenever there is a threat to the peace or breach of peace, an act of aggression. Therefore, the delegation of Afghanistan has been looking for such an opportunity to have the voice of the Afghans heard by this distinguished Council. The Afghan delegation would like to submit the Council question as why the people of Afghanistan, who had fell victims to aggression and foreign interference since 1978, were once again exposed to a conspiracy and foreign military intervention. Why civilian population, including women, children, and elderly, especially of the capital Kabul, long undergone hardships, bereavement, deprivation, hunger, and homelessness, come constantly under inhuman rocketing and sometimes aerial bombardment by the mercenaries called Taliban, causing death, injuries, and destruction. Yes, the Afghan nation, after forbearing 1.7 million of human sacrifices, contributed as one of the most important factors to the diminishing of the threat of a nuclear confrontation, termination of the Cold War, preservation of human values, and further strengthening of a framework of a world order based on democracy and human rights. This nation, Mr. President, deserved to be sympathized by the world community and should have been supported in its national endeavors aimed at overcoming problems left by 17 years of war, as well as in the serious challenges the country encounters for its reconstruction. Ironically, it is with anguish to note that over the last 4 years, conspirators and interventionists linked to Pakistani military intelligence circles, sometimes in connivance with other outside supporters, have been attempting to overthrow the government of the Islamic State of Afghanistan and to enthrone a Pakistani-approved regime in Kabul. This hostile and unjust scheme has given rise to a renowned widespread Afghan resistance while creating legitimate concern of the countries of the region. Mr. President, it is a common knowledge that the motive in convening this meeting is not to floor allegations, but it is rather to seek a trusted and credible way out of the ongoing conflict in my country, Afghanistan. However, considering the identification of the root causes of the conflict as an indispensable prerequisite for a genuine search for a lasting, credible, and comprehensive solution, we must elaborate and analyze factors shaping the conflict. I cannot but to underscore briefly the unfriendly and indeed hostile behavior of those Pakistani intelligence circles acting against the most sincere will of the Pakistani nation and their valued historical and moral capital, namely the fraternity of the Afghan people. Pakistani circles, a top inter-service intelligence, ISI, the military intelligence service, jeopardize peace under hypocritical attempts pretended as efforts for peace and supplement the tension with fanning the flame of ethnic hatred among our people. These circles sponsor meetings, gatherings, and ventures with the hope to forge an anti-government coalition to attempt to assault Kabul and to sabotage inter-Afghan dialogue, conducive to national reconciliation and reconstruction. Mr. President, since the establishment in April 1992 of the Islamic State of Afghanistan, Pakistani military intelligence circles covertly searching their preference by supporting, provoking, and stirring their stooges for seizure of power in Kabul. This malicious conspiracy have caused vast devastations and human losses. The inter-Afghan dialogue were once outrightly sabotaged. The world witnessed the abortive coup attempt of 1st January 1994 against the Islamic State of Afghanistan by armed groups, some of them quartered on Pakistani soil. During the coup, more than 3,000 rockets were showered on the innocent inhabitants of Kabul and on residential targets in the city. These acts of aggression took over 4,000 innocent lives and wounded virtually 8,000 people, mostly women and children. In that abortive coup attempt, the brutal attack on Kabul, Pakistani military and intelligence elements were physically involved. The government captured 25 Pakistani heavily armed militia who were later released to His Highness Prince Turki Al Faisal, Minister of National Security of Saudi Arabia, who in a goodwill mission visited Kabul to secure their release. Furthermore, on different occasions, including during recent weeks, as a gesture of goodwill of the Islamic State of Afghanistan, a considerable number of captured Pakistani saboteurs and spies have been released. As accounted for in our statement before the 50th General Assembly, some still remain in our custody, whose names and descriptions appear therein, document A/50/PV95. Mr. President, I should like to draw the attention of the distinguished Security Council members very briefly to some hard evidences of the interventions of Pakistan intelligence circles in Afghanistan. 1. Pakistan military intelligence, coupled with the Pakistani Ministry of the Interior, created a group of mercenaries called Taliban in September of 1994. They were trained in Kuwait, Pakistan, and sent inside Afghanistan intelligence officers and Pakistani frontier militia. The evidences and facts proving the Taliban as a creation of ISI and Pakistani Ministry of the Interior could be found in the statement made by the Afghan delegation on December 19, 1995, before the plenary of the General Assembly, document A/50/PV95, and also covered by international news media. 2. During 1995, And as early as 1996, Pakistani airplanes transporting arms and ammunition violated on numerous occasions the airspace of Afghanistan and landed in Kandahar, Shindand, and Herat airports, a few instances of which were identified before the General Assembly, document A/50PV95. 3. On September 28, 1995, Pakistani state-run telecommunication corporation, without the agreement of the Afghan central government, laid new telephone cables for military occupation purposes in southern and western Afghanistan. 4. On December 9, 1995, Pakistani government decided to camp its embassy in Jalalabad, the administrative center of the eastern Afghan province of Nangarhar. The decision was taken once again, unilaterally and without consultation with the Afghan government. Pakistani government also decided to send Ambassador Qazi Humayun and staff members of the embassy to Jalalabad. It is ironic to note that Mr. Qazi Humayun had been accredited as Pakistani ambassador to the government of Afghanistan in the capital city, Kabul, and he had been received by President Rabbani and presented his credentials to him. 5. On November 5, 1995, Mr. Asif Ali, Pakistani Foreign Minister, accompanied by Ambassador Qazi Humayun, paid a sudden visit to Mazar-e-Sharif in the northern province of Balkh of Afghanistan for, quote, negotiations, unquote, with Mr. Abdul Rashid Dostum, a military leader of the opposition. The visit that took place was without any prior information communicated to the Afghan government, in violation of all recognized international norms. 6. As a result of the recent months' endeavors of the Islamic State of Afghanistan, sustained dialogue towards further broadening the base of the government, as well as consolidation of political process in the country took place. Consequently, initial agreement of the 3 members of the opposition coalition were secured. To sabotage Kabul efforts, the Pakistani authorities on 7th of February 1996 convened a 3-day special gathering of the Afghan opposition in Islamabad. A red carpet treatment was provided to the leaders of the opposition groups. By this notorious maneuver, Pakistani authorities managed to foil the initial understandings reached between the government and the opposition. Mr. President, the correspondents of renowned newspapers of the world have recorded their eyewitnesses about the direct involvement of Pakistani conspirators and saboteurs in the internal affairs of our country. Here, for the sake of the record, I should like to mention few examples among many others of the Pakistani newspapers and politicians' views about Pakistan's intervention in Afghanistan. As early as 20th October 1995, a prominent Pakistani newspaper, Dawn, featured an editorial written by a senior Pakistani political analyst and writer, Mr. M. Baqir Naqvi, analyzing the root causes of the conflict. The editorial says, and I quote, "Politicians in Islamabad would do well to pause and ponder. The Taliban umbilical cord to Pakistan has been visible to all," unquote. The ideas expressed by Mr. Naqvi were confirmed after thorough study by the well-known American journalist and analyst, Mr. John Burns, who New York Times dated March 27, 1996 says, and I quote, "After 18 months of covert military and financial backing for a guerrilla group that has imposed Muslim fundamentalist rule on more than half of Afghanistan, Pakistan appears to have shifted towards a policy that aims to bring an end to the civil war," unquote. The article continues.